When did that happen? Stephanie White's gay. Good for her. Live your best life. Who cares? She's not strong enough. She doesn't have enough integrity. She's fearful of her job, fearful of protest. Nobody would have ever heard of Stephanie White, the All-American, the Purdue player, Miss Basketball, if boys were allowed to play with her.
Dan Dakich just went off on live radio. He tore into Stephanie White over the trans debate hanging over the entire WNBA right now, calling out her integrity, her courage, everything. And somehow, in the middle of all of it, the media is still trying to drag Caitlin Clark into a fight she never signed up for. Here is everything.
Okay, and because this is why people are mad now. Caitlin Clark, she does not care. Why is she not speaking up to this? Jemele Hill, why does Caitlin Clark not talk about this? She needs to be held accountable too. Caitlin Clark should have to talk about this. You know how some of these goofballs are. They just want to drag Caitlin Clark into everything. Okay, and this is what Jemele Hill had to say. We'll start with her first. Caitlin Clark should not have to answer to something her teammate said. That said, if she is asked the question, a fair one, and opts to say no comment, or I don't have enough information, or a non-answer, that's fine too. Or if she just says what she feels. No, she absolutely should not say what she feels. She needs to say no comment, next question. She don't need to answer to any of this, you goofball. Okay? These teams do their players a disservice by doing things like this because it creates a bigger story. If y'all don't have her prepped for these moments, what are you even doing?
Listen to how fast this turned into a pile-on Caitlin Clark. Jemele Hill is out here saying she needs to be held accountable, that she should have to talk about this, even though she never made a single comment on it. The whole premise is that her silence is somehow the story. But think about what they are actually asking for. They want a 23-year-old to hand them a soundbite on one of the most divisive topics in sports right now, just so they can turn it into a headline. She has said nothing, and somehow that is being spun as controversy. That right there tells you this was never about Caitlin Clark caring or not caring. It was about needing a quote.
For women's sports comments, and we're going to get to Dan Dakich after this because he absolutely exploded on Stephanie White. Here it says Caitlin Clark was not made available to speak to reporters despite recording her fourth triple-double of her career. Her teammates that were made available fled the scene when a reporter sent by Outkick attempted to ask about Sophie Cunningham's recent stance on protecting women's sports. And while Clark and her teammates were on the floor dominating the Portland Fire, the Fever's fifth straight win, their coach was going viral on social media for answers to questions asked by the same reporter about the women's sports debate that has gripped the W in recent weeks, okay? So, Stephanie White pretty much avoided it, and now they're mad that they have not been able to get a soundbite from Caitlin Clark. And Dan Dakich absolutely went off on Stephanie White's response to the question about should a biological male be able to play in the WNBA.
This is where it gets messy. Clark was not made available to reporters after her fourth career triple-double, and her teammates that did talk fled the second a reporter tried to bring up Sophie Cunningham and the women's sports debate. So while Clark and the Fever were out there winning their fifth straight game, the real story blowing up online had nothing to do with basketball. It was their head coach, Stephanie White, getting hammered for how she answered a question about the trans debate in the WNBA. Everybody wanted a piece of Clark, and instead they got White's non-answer going viral for all the wrong reasons.
When did it happen? When did being gay get overtaken by the whole transgender thing?
That's a great question, too. Aren't they two separate things? Like that is a really, really good question by Dan Dakich.
When did that happen? Stephanie White's gay. Good for her. Live your best life. Who cares? She's not strong enough. She doesn't have enough integrity. She's fearful of her job, fearful of protest.
Now, this is the thing I will say. I think the coaches should just say, I'm only here to talk about basketball. Next question. I think everybody should just say that at this point. I don't knock them for not blatantly coming out and saying, no, men shouldn't be able to play, because they don't want to lose their job. And there is a chance that they could lose their job. Like if the Portland Fire coach would have came out and just said that, there's a chance that he could have got fired. Like if the fans and all that would have made enough noise. They're not trying to risk their job. I think they just need to say no comment. I'm moving on, basketball only.
And this is where Dan Dakich stopped holding back. He asked the one question nobody in the media wants to touch. When exactly did being gay get lumped in with the transgender debate like they're the same conversation? Then he turned it straight on Stephanie White, said she is gay herself. Good for her, live your life, nobody cares about that. But he said she does not have the integrity to just say what everybody already knows, that a man should not be playing in a women's league. He called her scared, fearful of her job, fearful of protest. That is about as direct as sports talk radio gets.
White's gay, good for her, live your best life, who cares? She's not strong enough. She doesn't have enough integrity. She's fearful of her job, fearful of protest, by simply saying something that 80% of the country, and probably the world, probably 90% of the world, knows should be. Boys shouldn't play against girls.
I'm with you. I'm with Dan. I'm with Dan. I'm with Dan. But I see why they scared to get fired. They're not going to come out and say it because they're scared to get fired. That's the truth. That's the truth. But I agree with Dan.
If she doesn't have enough integrity, she's fearful of her job, fearful of protest, by simply saying something that 80% of the country, and probably the world, probably 90% of the world, knows should be. Boys shouldn't play against girls. Now, I have a solution. If you're transitioning from girl to boy or boy to girl, both of them, you play with the boys. Simple. Right now, you're playing with the girls. But beside that, when did the whole gay pride, gay thing get hijacked by the crazy-ass transgender movement?
From there, Dakich just kept building. He said White is avoiding saying something that 80, maybe 90% of the country already believes, that boys should not be playing against girls. He even threw out his own fix. If you are transitioning either direction, you play with the boys. Simple as that. And the wild part is, the hosts reacting to him were not fighting him on it. They were agreeing, saying, yeah, we are with Dan. We get why coaches are scared to lose their job over it, but they know he's right. That is not a normal radio reaction. That is a host getting fully talked into someone else's rant live on air.
Nobody would have ever heard of Stephanie White, the All-American, the Purdue player, Miss Basketball, if boys were allowed to play with her.
That's a fact. Oh, my God. He is Yo, Dan Dakich, you are cooking with fish grease. Stir the pot. Stir the pot. Keep cooking, Dan. Keep cooking. You wouldn't have made it if you was competing against dudes. Duh. Like, what are you talking about? Yo, that's a really, really good point.
Nobody would have ever heard of Stephanie White, the All-American, the Purdue player, Miss Basketball, if boys were allowed to play with her. She'd have been on the team probably because it's small school. She's probably a good athlete, but wouldn't have played a lot. And she knows that. She's not stupid, although she's coming off very, very dumb. She has shown herself not to be a leader. She's shown herself to not protect her players. She's shown herself to, quite frankly, have a lack of integrity, a lack of confidence, and a lack of character. And that's sad because she's a nice little girl.
Then Dakich brought up something that actually landed harder than anything before it. He pointed out that Stephanie White grew up playing at a tiny Indiana high school, became a Purdue All-American, won Miss Basketball, and none of that happens if boys were allowed to play in her league back then. Nobody ever hears her name. The hosts jumped right on that too, saying flat out she would not have made it competing against dudes. It is a brutal point because it is coming from her own story, not a hypothetical. That is what turned this from a hot take into a real gut check.
But damn, at some point, you got to stand up. And when did this whole thing get hijacked? When did it?
I think that is the question of all questions. When did it get hijacked? It moved from, lesbian or gay, whatever, which is fine. Who cares? When did it go over to transgender? I don't know, man. This whole thing is crazy. But I do know one thing. They are trying to drag Caitlin Clark. They are thirsty. They are dying to drag Caitlin Clark into this conversation. They are so dying to drag her into this conversation. It's disgusting. They're mad that she's not giving them a quote and a clip on it. And To be honest, I think everybody at this point just needs to say no comment. I'm here to talk about basketball.
So here is where it all lands. Caitlin Clark said absolutely nothing on this topic, and she still got dragged into a national controversy over silence alone. Meanwhile, her own coach is getting torched on air for trying to dodge the exact same question. Dakich is convinced coaches should just say they're here to talk basketball and move on. And honestly, that might be the only smart play left for any of them. But it does not change the fact that people are furious Clark will not give them a quote, and they are not backing off anytime soon. Do you think Caitlin Clark should be forced to answer a question that has nothing to do with her? Drop a comment, smash like, and subscribe.